It's like every time you blink in the crypto world, there's something new, right?
Yeah.
Another coin pops up, some headline drops, and you have to learn a whole new vocabulary. I mean, it's a lot to keep up with.
Yeah, no kidding. It's a total whirlwind out there, and you've got all these different opinions and stats and algorithms flying around. It can be really tough to get a clear picture of what's actually going on.
Absolutely. And that's kind of what we try to do here with these deep dives, right? We take all that chaos, all that info, and try to boil it down to what really matters.
Exactly. Cut through the noise.
Exactly. So today we're focusing on one particular crypto that's been making waves lately. Cronos, or CRO, as you might see it, ticker symbol wise. You send over a really interesting collection of sources on it. We've got price predictions, real-time market data, and some pretty major news stories that are definitely relevant.
Yeah, I thought it would be good to get a nice, well-rounded view. We've got those algorithmic predictions, those like glimpses into the future, and then of course what's happening in the market right now at this very moment, and then the news, the actual events that could shake things up.
Right, it's like a 360-degree view. So for everyone listening, our goal today is simple. We're cutting through all the hype surrounding Cronos. We want to figure out where the price is sitting right now, what those predictions are saying, and maybe most importantly, what's actually happening in the real world that's driving these changes.
Sounds like a plan.
All right, so let's start with the basics, the price. Now, even just glancing at the data, it looks like different sources are reporting slightly different numbers for Cronos. Why is that? Right off the bat, what does that tell us?
That's actually a super important point, and it really highlights one of the key things about crypto markets.
Yeah.
They're decentralized. So you're going to see prices fluctuate pretty rapidly, and those tiny variations you're seeing, that's often because the trading's happening on different exchanges, and they might have slightly different prices at any given moment.
Makes sense.
Yeah. So looking at the data, like around March 24th and 25th of 2025, CoinCodex, they had it at 0.111011. But then Forbes crypto market data, they were reporting 0.11 on one pick. Binance, and this is interesting because they don't actually trade Cronos on their platform, but they were showing 20.092963. Decrypt had it at 0.110196. ABP Live reported 0.11074, and then Benzinga, they were a little bit lower at 0.117. So, there are these little discrepancies. But the big picture, Cronos was hanging around that 11-cent mark.
Got it. So generally in that ballpark. Now, one thing that really jumps out from all these numbers is those 24-hour gains. Like across the board, it seems like Cronos had a really good day, a pretty big upward swing. What can you tell us about that?
Absolutely. You're seeing that reflected in pretty much all the sources. Like CoinCodex, they noted a jump of 32% Forbes had it even higher, plus 33.73%. Binance, they were reporting plus 35.99%, just shy of 36%. Decrypt saw a 32.73% rise. ABP Live, they clocked in at 30.61%. And even Benzinga, even though they had a slightly lower starting point, they still reported a 24% increase. So when you see that kind of consistent positive movement across all these different platforms, it really points to something significant happening. Like there was some kind of positive catalyst that really pushed the price up.
Right. So we've got this upward momentum. Things are looking good in the short term, at least. Now let's look ahead a little bit, peek into those crystal balls, see what the predictions are saying. CoinCodex gave us some specific short-term targets. What can we make of those?
Yeah, they did. So their 5-day prediction as of late March 2025 was around 0.09578. Which, if you think about it, it actually suggests a little bit of a decrease in the immediate days after those numbers we were just talking about. And their 1-month prediction, looking further out to April 24th, 2025, they actually predicted another decrease down to about 0.0865555. And that's about an 8.87% drop from where it was at that time.
So a slight downward trend in the very short term, according to their algorithms at least. But they also mentioned something about a potential investment opportunity, even though the short-term outlook was kind of bearish. That sounds kind of interesting. Can you explain that a little more?
Yeah. It's actually really interesting how they presented it. Like they're saying, okay, yeah, short term, we think there might be a little bit of a dip. But then they're also saying, hold on a second. Based on our longer term projections for the rest of 2025, if you buy in now and you hold on to it until November 25th, 2025, you could actually see a pretty significant return. They estimated a potential profit of $944 and $1,000 investment. That's a 94.43% return on investment, which is pretty impressive. So even though they're predicting this short-term volatility, they're also saying their model is anticipating a recovery and even some growth later in the year.
Got it. So basically, maybe a little bit of turbulence for the next few weeks, but potentially smoother sailing later in the year, at least according to this one model. Okay, so that's the short term. What about the bigger picture for 2025? What kind of price range are they predicting for the entire year?
For the whole of 2025, Coin Codex is saying we could see Cronos trading anywhere between 0.073993 on the low end and 0.214091 on the high end. That's a pretty wide range. Their average price for the year, they're putting it at about 0.105629 titles. And they actually reiterate that potential ROI of 94.43%. Again, that's if you buy around the price levels we're seeing now, and if their model turns out to be right. And they even break it down month by month, saying that months like October and November of 2025 could be particularly good for Cronos, with higher prices and higher potential returns compared to the earlier months of the year.
Okay, that gives us a good overview for the rest of this year. Now let's zoom out even further. What about 2026 and beyond? Are we ready to do some serious long-term speculation?
Yeah, why not? Buckle up. So for 2026, their models are showing a trading range between 0.868032 and SNEO's 0.160235, with an average price around 0.6098026. So a bit lower than 2025, but still potentially profitable. Then things get a little interesting. For 2027, they're actually a bit more cautious. Their average price prediction drops to 0.070105. And they think this downward trend might continue into 2028 with an average price of 0.470105. But then 2029, they're predicting some wild swings. Like they're saying it could go as low as 0.032223 or as high as 0.317361. The average for the year, around 0.847299. And finally, 2030, they're seeing potential for some big growth again. They're predicting a range from 0.02092 to 0.2047988 with an average of 0.080127. That could translate to an ROI of almost 86%. So yeah, it's a bit of a roller coaster ride.
It definitely sounds like we're in for some twists and turns, maybe even a loop-de-loop or two. Now, the question everyone's probably wondering, is Cronos ever going to hit those really big numbers, like $1, $10, even $100? What does Coin Codex say about that?
Yeah, well, according to their models, those kind of moonshot scenarios, they're pretty unlikely, at least in the time frame we're looking at. They're very upfront about that. They say for Cronos to hit $1, it would need to increase by over 800% from where it is now, $10. That's a nearly 9,000% jump. And $100. We're talking over 90,000%. Their highest prediction, and this is all the way out in 2029, is $0.317361. So yeah, those huge numbers, they're not really on the radar, at least for now.
So those Lambos and yachts might have to wait a little longer, huh?
Maybe.
All right, so we've got the predictions. We see what the future might hold, maybe. But what about the here and now? What actually caused that big price jump we saw? It wasn't just random market fluctuations, right? There had to be a reason.
Oh, there was definitely a reason. And all signs are pointing to a pretty specific event, the partnership announcement between Trump Media and Crypto.com. That seems to be the main driver behind all this excitement.
Right, that was big news. So what does this partnership actually mean for Cronos and for crypto in general? Like, break it down for us.
Okay, so the main thing is this agreement. And it's important to note it's a non-binding agreement, but it outlines the potential launch of ETFs, exchange-traded funds, under the Truth.Fi brand. That's Trump Media's fintech arm, by the way. These ETFs, they're supposed to have a bunch of different assets with a big focus on being made in America. And this is the important part. They specifically mention digital assets, Bitcoin, and yes, Cronos, as potential parts of these ETFs.
So Cronos could be part of a Trump-branded ETF. That's pretty wild. What's Crypto.com's role in all this? Are they going to be the ones actually running these ETFs?
Their role seems to be more on the operational side, like the tech and logistics. They're expected to handle the whole back end, the technology that makes it all work, the safekeeping of all those digital assets, and the actual supply of the cryptocurrencies themselves. So they're kind of leveraging their existing expertise in the crypto space to make it all happen.
So when are these ETFs supposed to launch? Any timeline on that?
Well, from what we've seen in the news, they're hoping to launch later in 2025. And this is huge. This is all depending on regulatory approval. Like, they need the SEC, the Securities and Exchange Commission, to give them the green light. So, yeah, the announcement got everyone excited, and it definitely seems to have pushed the price up. But there are still some major hurdles to overcome before any of this actually happens.
Right. We know the SEC can be tough on crypto. Nothing's guaranteed. Now, what were the experts saying about this partnership? Like the market analysts, the people who watch this stuff all day, what was their initial reaction?
They were pretty excited, actually. Like Alankar Saxena from Moodrex and the team at CoinDCX, they both pointed to this partnership as the main reason for that big price jump we saw. They said the news just injected a ton of optimism into the market. Everyone got super bullish on Cronos, and that led to a lot of buying activity, which of course pushes the price up. And their logic makes sense. I mean, if Cronos is included in a high-profile ETF, especially one connected to a name like Trump, that could bring in a lot of new investors and really boost demand.
Yeah, it makes sense. It's like instant legitimacy, right?
Pretty much, yeah.
Okay, so that's the Trump partnership. What else is going on with Cronos? I think I remember something about a proposal for the Crypto.com chain itself, something about payments?
Yeah, the Forbes article mentioned that. It's basically Crypto.com's long-term vision for a decentralized mobile payment system. They're calling it a protocol. And their main selling points are efficiency and security, making it easier and safer for people to make payments with crypto no matter where they are or what platform they're using, and ideally with lower fees or even no fees at all.
So it's more of a future-focused thing, right? Not something that's going to impact the price tomorrow.
Exactly. But it does show that they're serious about innovation, about making crypto more usable in the real world. And in the long run, that could be really good for Cronos because it's the native token of the Crypto.com ecosystem. So if the ecosystem grows, Cronos could grow with it.
Right, it's all connected. I also noticed something about the CEO of Crypto.com going to the White House. What was that about? Was that related to Cronos at all?
Yeah, and the Benzinga article mentioned that. Chris Marszalek, the CEO, he was invited to the White House Crypto Summit. It wasn't directly related to the Trump media partnership, but it does show that Crypto.com is engaging with policymakers. They're part of the conversation. And that could be really important for them, especially if they're trying to get those ETFs approved. It shows that they're at the table, that they're being taken seriously by regulators.
So good for them, building relationships, getting their foot in the door. Now, we've talked a lot about this made in America aspect of the ETFs, but one of the articles, Be in Crypto, brought up a really interesting point about where Crypto.com is actually based. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, that's a really important point, and it kind of complicates things. So they're pushing this made in America angle for the ETFs, which, appeals to a certain segment of the market. But Crypto.com itself, their headquarters, it's in Singapore. And that could be a problem from a regulatory perspective. The U.S. government, the SEC, they might not be too happy about a financial product that's marketed as made in America, but is actually run by a company overseas. It raises questions about oversight, about who's really in control.
Right. It's like a mixed message almost. And Be in Crypto went even further, suggesting that this whole Cronos ETF thing could become a political crypto scandal. Why did they say that?
They're basically saying that because you got a former U.S. president involved, his name is on the product, and you've got this company that's not even based in the U.S. It just creates this situation that's ripe for controversy. They're comparing it to those politically themed tokens that popped up before, like the Trump token, which, those didn't really end well. So they're saying this could attract a lot of unwanted attention from regulators, from the media, from the public, and that could really hurt Cronos, regardless of whether the ETF itself is actually a good investment or not.
So even though the initial news was good for the price, there's a lot of potential for things to go south. Okay, let's move on to the technical analysis. What's CoinCodex saying about how Cronos is actually performing in the market?
Well, as of late March 2025, their analysis was showing a neutral sentiment for Cronos. Like, they weren't super bullish, but they weren't super bearish either. They found 17 indicators that were pointing towards a positive outlook and 11 indicators that were suggesting a more negative outlook. So pretty much a mixed bag.
So no clear direction from the technicals. What about those moving averages? Those are always important, right? What were they saying?
Yeah, they're like a basic indicator of the trend. So they looked at the 50-day SMA, the simple moving average, which at that time was at 0.088467. They predicted that it might go up to 0.94177 by April 24th, 2025. So a slight upward trend in the short term. Then they looked at the 200-day SMA, which gives you a longer-term perspective. That was at 0.118011, and they said it might rise to 0.120231 by the same date. But it's important to note that the current price was still below that 200-day SMA, which means the longer-term trend might still be a little bit shaky.
Okay, so short-term may be good, long-term not so sure. What about the RSI, the Relative Strength Index? What was that telling us?
Yeah, that's a good one to look at. It tells you if an asset is overbought or oversold. For Cronos, the 14-day RSI was at 47.85. And anything between 30 and 70 is considered neutral. So basically, you're saying that Cronos wasn't showing any strong momentum in either direction at that moment.
So just kind of chilling, right?
Yeah, exactly. Kind of hanging out in the middle.
CoinCodex also had a bunch of data on all these different SMAs and EMMAs, simple moving averages and exponential moving averages over different time periods. What was the main takeaway from all that?
It was pretty mixed, honestly. Like the shorter term SMAs, like the 3-day, 5-day, 10-day, all those, they were mostly saying buy. But the longer term ones, especially the 100-day and 200-day, they were saying sell. And then the EMAs, which react more quickly to price changes, they were mostly bearish. Like the 21-day, 50-day, 100-day, 200-day, all saying sell. And even the weekly ones were mostly sell, except for the really long-term ones, like the 50-week, 100-week, 200-week. Those were still saying buy. So it really depends on how you look at it.
It's like pick your time frame, pick your indicator, and you can find whatever you want.
Pretty much, yeah. It's not always clear-cut.
What about the oscillators? Those are supposed to tell us about short-term momentum, right? What were those saying?
Yeah, so most of the oscillators, they were neutral, like the RSI, the stochastic RSI, the MACD, all those. They weren't really giving us any strong signals. The only ones that stood out were the VWMA, the volume-weighted moving average, which was saying sell, and the whole moving average, which was saying buy. So again, kind of a mixed bag.
So no real consensus there. They also mentioned something about support and resistance levels. What are those, and what were the levels for Cronos?
Yeah, so support and resistance, those are basically price levels where the price might reverse direction. Like support is a level below the current price where there's a lot of buying interest, so the price might bounce back up. Resistance is the opposite. It's above the current price, and that's where there might be a lot of selling pressure, so the price might have trouble going higher. And for Cronos, they identified a few key levels. On the support side, they had 0.83755, 0.10083755, 0.109309, and 0.10 dig 529 levels.
So if you're into day trading, those are the numbers to watch, right?
Yes, those are the levels where things could get interesting.
Okay, now let's zoom out even further. Talk about the overall market sentiment. What was the fear and greed index looking like? That's always a good indicator of how people are feeling.
Yeah, so at the time of the report, the fear and greed index was at 45, which is considered fear. So even though Cronos was doing well and the market in general was doing okay, people were still a little bit cautious, maybe even a little bit worried.
So it's like, okay, things are good, but are they going to stay good? Who knows?
Yeah, that's pretty much the sentiment.
Now, Cronos doesn't exist in a vacuum, right? It's part of this whole ecosystem. Did CoinCodex say anything about how it correlates with other cryptocurrencies?
Yeah, they did. They said that over the previous week, Cronos had shown a positive correlation with Immutable X, Shiba Inu, and Dogecoin. So those coins were going up, Cronos was going up too. And when they were going down, Cronos was going down too. And then on the flip side, they said Cronos had a negative correlation with Pax Gold, DEX, and Tron. So when those were going up, Cronos was going down and vice versa.
So basically it moves with some coins, moves against others. Kind of like a dance, right?
Yeah, kind of. But it's important to remember that these correlations, they can change. So it's not like a hard and fast rule.
Right. It's just something to keep in mind. Okay, final question about the data itself. What about Cronos's long-term performance? How's it been doing over the past few years?
Well, the data from CoinCodex showed that over the last year, Cronos has actually been down 23.35%. And if you look even further back, like over the past 3 years, it's down 75.78%. So that's a pretty significant drop.
Ouch. So even though we're seeing this recent surge, the big picture is still kind of rough.
Yeah, it's important to keep that in mind. Like, this recent jump is definitely good news, but Cronos still has a long way to go to get back to where it was a few years ago.
Okay, now one of the articles, the ABP Live one, had a section called What Crypto Exchanges Are Saying. What were some of the key points there?
Yeah, so the general feeling was pretty positive, especially about the whole Trump Crypto.com thing. They were saying that Bitcoin was holding steady above $87,000, that Bitcoin ETFs were still seeing good inflows, and that the market was generally happy about the possibility of the Trump administration easing up on those tariff policies. And specifically about the partnership, the CoinDCX research team. They said that Cronos gained massive strength and surged significantly because of this news. So yeah, the exchanges and the analysts, they seem pretty bullish on Cronos.
So good vibes all around, at least for now. Now, we've talked a lot about the positive stuff, the price predictions, the potential, but are there any downsides to Cronos? Any controversies, any red flags? We got to be balanced here.
Yeah, definitely. One article from Binance Square mentioned a pretty big controversy from a while back. It was about the Crypto.com CEO facing a lot of criticism for reissuing something like 70 billion CRO tokens.
Wow, that's a lot of tokens.
Yeah, it was a big deal. People were worried about inflation, about their existing CRO holdings losing value. And even though the CEO defended it, saying it was necessary for the platform's growth, it definitely left a bad taste in some people's mouths. And it just goes to show that Cronos has had its ups and downs, and those past events, they can still affect how people view it today.
Right. It's like a reminder that crypto is still a bit of a wild west and there are always risks involved. And of course, we have to mention those disclaimers, right? Those are important.
Super important. CoinCodex, Binance, all the reputable sources, they all say the same thing. This is not financial advice.
Yeah.
They're not telling you what to do with your money. Investing in crypto is risky and you could lose everything. So do your own research, talk to a financial advisor if you need to, and don't invest more than you can afford to lose.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here. What are the main takeaways from our Cronos deep dive? Like, if someone's listening to this, what should they remember?
So the big picture is this. Cronos has seen a huge price surge recently, and that seems to be mainly due to the Trump Media and Crypto.com partnership and those potential ETFs. But even though that's exciting, the price predictions are all over the place. Some say it'll go up, some say it'll go down, and everyone agrees that it's going to be volatile. The technical analysis, it's basically neutral, and the overall market sentiment, it's still kind of cautious, even with all the good news. So yeah, there's potential for big gains, but there are also some serious risks to consider.
This is a bit of a gamble, right? High risk, high reward, maybe.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. Crypto is always a gamble to some extent.
And that brings us to our final thought for today. We've seen how this Trump Media partnership, this real-world event, has had a huge impact on Cronos. So, for everyone listening, we want to ask you this. When you're researching crypto, when you're trying to decide where to put your money, how much weight do you give to these kinds of events? Are you just looking at charts and algorithms, or are you paying attention to the bigger picture, the politics, the news, all that stuff? Because it's clear that those things can have a huge impact.
Absolutely. And we'd encourage you to go beyond just the numbers, dig deeper into the companies involved, stay up to date on regulations, and pay attention to the overall market sentiment. The more informed you are, the better decisions you'll be able to make.
Couldn't agree more. And that's a wrap on another deep dive. Thanks for joining us, everyone, and stay tuned for more crypto adventures.
See you next time.